The first time I called myself an activist, I was well beyond the point where I probably should have. I started doing the activism work at a much younger age, but I didn't want to put that label on myself. And I think that's true for a lot of different people. I don't know if the times have changed in the past couple years, but my reason was kind of different from the usual. I was at a boot camp and they asked us to raise our hands if we consider ourselves activists. I was one of the maybe 4 people that left their hands down. We went around in a circle sharing why we didn't consider ourselves activists. The other people said, there's certain discrimination, there's certain anecdotes, there's certain stereotypes placed on that label that they don't want to be associated with, which is something I completely understand. For other people, it was safety risks, especially living in a country like in the Philippines, where red tagging is something that's not only normalized, but done in such a frequent manner. I totally get that. But when it got to me, I said I didn't want to call myself an activist because I thought I wasn't good enough to. Growing up with and in the climate movement taught me that people have very differing opinions. And it also taught me that I am someone who cares how people perceive me. I remember listening to conversations where people would say, that person does a lot of grassroots work, but they're not doing the policy, they're not doing the systems change. Or that person's doing a lot of policy, they're going abroad for different conferences, but they're not doing the grassroots work, they're not doing the meaningful community engagement. In my head, what's the right path? What is it that we should do? When someone only does art, it's not meaningful enough, but when someone doesn't do art, it's also not meaningful enough. It's a strange kind of coagulation of any way you turn, there's something you're doing wrong. And so I was very, very scared of the label of being an activist. Then I was scrolling today, many years after this happened, and for years now I've considered myself an activist, and I've done the activist work, I've lived that life. And I saw this post on Facebook that said, hot take, na hindi naman dapat. I'm going to translate this as we go along. Activist does not equal a good person. Other people are cheaters in academics or relationships. Others are bullies. A lot of them are performative. Be more mindful. You yell for the country, but you're not a countryman. You're not for the people, and you're not equal. Ew. This gave me such a visceral reaction, and I'm not entirely sure why. But from what I can gather, I think it's because this concept is something that I've never fully grasped. The idea that because you've put a label of activist on yourself, you're not allowed to be imperfect or have room to grow is insane to me. And 100%, you're allowed to call people out on hypocrisy. Like, I've seen people be called out on oh, you talk about doing things sustainably, but you don't. That's hypocrisy within your actions, within your words. But this is just, okay, you want reform, but you're also a bad person. I feel like those two things can coexist in some way. You can have good opinions and be a bad person in the same way that you can have horrible opinions and be a nice person to the people around you. People are complicated, they're complex, they're nuanced. Most importantly, they're people, and you have to give them room to grow. The thing I found interesting about this is going back to my past experience, right? Other people were saying activism is too progressive. They see it as scary to be considered an activist. But now it's performative. It's not progressive enough. So where exactly is the line that needs to be towed? That's what I find interesting about this. The word performative to me and the way it's evolved in the past couple of years has been absolutely insane, but also very interesting to watch. You know, we've seen the concept of males, performative men, right? And then it kind of became a meme, but then it became serious again, but then it became a meme again, and that's kind of how things work on the internet. But I think the concept of performativity as an activist is not too new. I still remember the discourse during the pandemic on performative posting as activism, and I still remember holding the stance that I don't care whether or not it is performative. If they're doing the work, they're doing the work. And I think I was onto something. I mean, this kind of idea that you can't really be enough, it gives us paralysis. And I think that's really what's dangerous here. The reason why I say imperfect activists are okay, actually, it's not just that they're okay, they're preferred. The pursuit of perfection is always gonna be paralyzing. It's kind of in its nature, I believe. And that paralysis just stops us from acting within the movement. And when we stop acting within the movement, things don't move. Our goals are very specific, and our actions need to be too. But this leads me into the question, how do we get out of this paralysis? You know, you're in this constant state of wondering, am I doing the right thing as an activist? Am I going to be criticized for hypocrisy? Am I going to be criticized because I did the wrong thing, but I have a certain label on me? In my opinion, being an activist just means doing the work. Doing the work to change or even just sway the change of policy, of systems, of communities, of understanding, even on a small level. Because ultimately, as much as it is cringe and as much as I hate hearing it over and over again, small actions do matter. Especially when they work with people and communities and are collective and are rooted in meaningful change. That's doing the work. I think the next question for me is, what activism is the right kind of activism, and does all activism have a place? Here I kind of want to talk about the role of the artist. This is a really fun quote. It's by Tony Rambara. The role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. What a sexy quote. I love it. But it's true. I always say art is the center of a movement. We can't continue to fight for something that isn't really seen in the arts. Because the arts is what motivates us, what moves us, what ties us to things emotionally. And as people, we need that emotional connection to do something long term and to do it with a will that's more than I need to make money or I need to survive. With a will that's willing to go against the grain and change. Because God knows going against the grain is not easy. And to do things that aren't easy, you need that motivation. But at the same time, if we only do art and we don't do policy and we don't do the dialogues and we don't enter those big rooms with the shiny tiles and the marble floors, the change won't be made in the widespread way that we want. Right? And there's always that idea of a complete revolution, and while I love that, there are steps that we can take now to make things better for the people that are alive, for the people that are experiencing disasters left and right, for the people who are experiencing this gas crisis with the higher inflation rates on literally everything. It's a matter of caring. I think if you care and you do something, it has a place. In the same way, I think people say, the most sustainable thing you can buy is the thing you already own. The most sustainable form of activism is things you can do and things you love doing. It doesn't matter if it's imperfect, it just matters that it's honest. And it matters that it's something you can do for the rest of your life. Because activism isn't just one post or one campaign, it's continuous, it's rigorous, and it's incredibly beautiful. So yes, I do think all activism has a place. But what can you really do in these situations? I think it's important to remember that organizing communities is kind of a lost art. It's coming back, and it's an art I myself need to learn more of. But we need to be able to be villagers. But as activists, we also need to be able to bring the village together and make sure the village doesn't go batshit insane, and make sure the village is actually functioning in a way that maybe it should or it needs to. And that's fine. That's part of the job, I think. As the last slide said that I didn't get to as fast as I wanted to, we aren't outnumbered, we're just out-organized. That's a quote from Malcolm X, but it's also from one of my friend's inspirations in the climate movement that I met recently. She shared this at one of the talks, and I thought, you know what? Hell yeah. We really aren't outnumbered. There's so many of us that want change, and there's so many of us that need it, even if we don't want it. But what we're lacking is the ability to appreciate everyone's actions for what they are. Yes, some activists are hypocrites sometimes. Yes, some activists only do one kind of work. Yes, some activists don't engage in the proper way. And yes, maybe some people who call themselves activists are performative. But if they're doing the work is getting done. That's really all I have to say. I think this was a really stupid video. I don't know why I made this. I just felt really strongly about this. I think being imperfect is much better than being in paralysis. At least you're doing something, And if you made it this far, we're like, 12 minutes in? Thank you so much, you're a trooper. I don't think anyone except my mom watched this all the way through. But if you did, let me know. And let me know if this was fun or entertaining in any way. Also, let me know if it was shit, because hey, I want to end this by saying activists are allowed to be critiqued at all times. And activists should be able to take critique. But they're also allowed to be imperfect. Peace.